Some stories begin with a single cry, sharp, desperate, impossible to ignore. On a crowded red-eye flight from Chicago to Seattle, a weary single dad fought to calm his baby girl as frustration spread through the cabin, until a woman in a pristine white Navy uniform stood up, reached out her arms, and did something no one on that plane expected. What happened next changed 3 lives forever and revealed a bond deeper than chance, grief, or rank. Before we begin, if you enjoy heartfelt stories of kindness, healing second chances, and the quiet heroes walking among us, we'd be honored to have you join our channel. Your support helps us bring more uplifting stories to you every week. Now, let's begin. The red-eye flight from Chicago to Seattle had barely leveled off when the first wail broke through the soft hum of the cabin. It cut across the aisle like a thin blade sharp enough for several heads to turn at once. At row 17, seat A, Blake Carson tightened his arms around the tiny bundle pressed against his chest, his daughter Lily, whose sobs trembled through her whole body. Blake swallowed hard. His throat burned. Hey, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice rough and gentle at the same time. Daddy's here. Daddy's right here. But Lily's cries only grew louder, vibrating through the cramped space, like a small storm no one had prepared for. A few passengers shifted irritably in their seats. One woman pressed her fingers against her temples. A man 2 rows up exhaled sharply, the kind of exasperated sigh Blake had grown painfully familiar with. 6 months. That was how long Blake had been doing this alone. 6 months since he lost Emma in the delivery room, the brightest light of his life extinguished on the day Lily first opened her eyes. Some days still felt like he was forcing himself to breathe, just to keep a promise he wasn't sure he had ever said out loud. Tonight was one of those nights. Lily's little fists kicked against his shirt, her face scrunched and blotchy, her tiny mouth wide with heartbreak she couldn't explain. Blake bounced her softly, trying everything he had learned in these hard, lonely months, rocking, humming the lullaby Emma used to sing, pressing her close so she could hear the rhythm of his heartbeat. Nothing worked. The crying swelled again, a full, desperate scream that ricocheted off the overhead bins. Blake's pulse hammered painfully in his ears. He could feel it happening in the eyes. The judgment. The silent verdict that he was failing, that he was one of those parents who couldn't keep their kid under control. A flight attendant, a young woman with tight blonde hair, and the stiff smile of someone who'd been patient too many times today, glanced over with growing concern. Blake avoided her eyes. Please don't come here. Please. Just give me a minute. But Lily was relentless, her voice lifting higher, almost trembling with fear, and the guilt pressed down on Blake's chest like a stone. I'm trying, baby. Daddy's trying, he whispered, burying his face in her warm hair. The cabin lights dimmed as the seatbelt sign dinged off. Even that gentle chime seemed to make Lily cry harder. Blake felt his throat close. He hadn't slept in almost 20 hours, and every muscle in his body ached from the double shift he'd pulled at the naval base. Being a janitor wasn't much, but it paid the bills barely, and Lily needed stability. But tonight he felt like he was unraveling. Sir, the flight attendant had arrived. Her smile was thin, now replaced by diplomatic concern. Is everything all right? She's been crying for a while. I know, Blake said quietly. I'm sorry. I'm trying. Other passengers were staring now, some sympathetic, many not. Blake felt heat rise to his face. He bounced Lily again, desperation creeping in. Perhaps the flight attendant said gently, if you step toward the back of the plane for a moment, it might help calm her down, just so she doesn't disturb the passengers further. There it was. The words he always dreaded. Disturb. Passengers. Further. As if he and Lily were a burden. As if grief and exhaustion and the crushing responsibility of raising a child alone made him an inconvenience. Blake opened his mouth to answer, but Lily let out another long, guttural cry, one that pierced straight through him. His vision blurred. The last time he'd heard a cry, that raw had been in the hospital, when the doctor placed Lily in his shaking arms, and he realized Emma wasn't coming back. He clenched his jaw, feeling the familiar sting of tears behind his eyes. Not here. Not in front of strangers. Not like this. "Sir." The flight attendant started again, more firmly this time. Blake nodded, defeated. "Okay. I'll try to take her back there." He moved to stand, fumbling with the diaper bag at his feet. The contents: spilled bottles, rolling a pacifier, bouncing down the aisle, a tiny pink sock dropping unnoticed near a passenger's shoe. Blake muttered another apology as he knelt, scrambling to gather everything with one hand while holding Lily with the other. He could feel the pressure building in his chest, a tightness that made each breath shallow. Not anger, just shame. A tired, familiar shame he had grown used to carrying. "I'm so sorry," he whispered again, though he wasn't sure who he was apologizing to anymore. Lily sobbed harder. Blake's hands trembled. "Just 1 minute of peace. Please, please." He finally managed to stand, balancing Lily against his shoulder, just as his knees wobbled. The aisle blurred the murmurs around him, fading into a dull roar. And then a shadow moved beside him. A gentle, steady voice spoke from behind his shoulder. "May I help?" Blake turned. A woman, calm, composed, radiant in a pristine white Navy uniform, stood from her seat. The gold stars on her shoulders gleamed softly under the cabin lights. Her presence was commanding, but not intimidating. Powerful, yet strangely comforting. She extended her arms with a quiet confidence, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "Let me hold her." Blake froze. His breath caught. Around them, the cabin seemed to pause, as if the whole plane held its breath. But Lily didn't wait. She reached out, her cries faltering, as though something in this stranger's voice cut through the storm inside her. Blake stared, stunned. Are you sure?" The woman nodded, once her eyes warm but unwavering. "I've got her," she said. "Trust me." And for the first time all night, for the first time in months, a flicker of hope stirred in Blake's chest. He slowly placed Lily into the Admiral's waiting arms, and the moment he did, the crying stopped, instantly, as though someone had turned off a switch. Lily looked up at the woman, hiccuping softly, then let out a small, breathy laugh. A laugh. The cabin absorbed the moment with a silence thicker than surprise. Several passengers blinked. One man muttered, "You've got to be kidding me." Blake just stared, breathless. The Admiral smiled down at Lily, her voice barely above a whisper. "There we go," she murmured. "You're all right now, sweetheart?" Blake felt his heart loosen, his knees weaken, and for the first time in a very long time, something inside him whispered, Maybe you're not as alone as you think." For a long moment, Blake could only stand there, rooted to the narrow aisle, as the woman in white held his daughter with a grace so natural it almost felt unreal. Lily, who had been collapsing into sobs seconds earlier, now rested peacefully against the Admiral's chest, her tiny face burrowed into the crisp fabric of the uniform, as though she had finally found the one place where the world didn't feel so overwhelming. The Admiral, he hadn't caught her name yet, shifted her, gently supporting Lily's back with one palm while brushing a delicate strand of hair off the baby's forehead with the other. She moved with the effortless confidence of someone who had led troops into storms and stared down crises most people would never understand. But there was something softer beneath the surface, something Blake recognized instantly, not from logic, but from instinct. Loss knows loss, and healing knows healing. The passengers who had been annoyed moments earlier now stared in a quiet mix of awe and relief. Someone whispered, "How did she do that?" Another muttered, "Miracle worker," half joking, half serious. But no one spoke loudly. No one dared to disturb the fragile peace that had settled over row 17. Blake finally exhaled his shoulders, slumping with exhaustion and relief. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice low, scratchy from emotion. The Admiral turned toward him. Under the soft glow of the cabin lights, Blake saw her clearly for the first time, sharp, thoughtful eyes that held the calm steadiness of the ocean after a storm. There were faint shadows beneath them, the kind you earn only after years of carrying responsibilities heavier than most people could imagine. Yet somehow, she radiated warmth. "You don't need to thank me," she replied gently. "I've heard that kind of cry before." She offered a small, knowing smile as she sank back into her seat. With a subtle tilt of her head, she motioned for Blake to sit beside her. The passengers in the adjacent seats quickly shifted, rearranging themselves, as though respecting a quiet authority no one had announced, but everyone recognized. Blake lowered himself into the seat next to her, careful not to brush against her uniform. He still wasn't sure if all of this was real. "She seems to trust you," he murmured. "It's mutual," the Admiral replied, looking down at Lily, as though she were the most delicate treasure she'd ever held. "Babies sense intention. They know who's holding fear, and who's holding love." Blake blinked. Her words struck deeper than she could have known. "I was doing everything I could," he admitted quietly. She wouldn't stop." "You're doing more than you think," the Admiral said, her voice firm but gentle. "You're here. That matters." It had been so long since anyone told Blake he was doing something right. He studied her for a moment, trying to understand how someone like her, a woman who carried herself like she'd walked the halls of power and the front lines of war, could speak with such softness. Her uniform bore the insignia of high rank, the kind Blake had only ever seen from afar at the naval base, where he mopped floors during night shifts. Gold stars, ribbons, medals, stories sewn into fabric. "Your Navy?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. She chuckled softly at the understatement. "Yes. Lauren Bennett. Admiral Bennett. Admiral." Blake's breath caught. He had never been close enough to an admiral to speak more than a passing greeting. Now one was sitting inches from him, holding his daughter, as though she had been waiting for this moment all her life. "Blake Carson," he said, clearing his throat. "And that's Lily." Lauren smiled, her eyes softening. "Lily," she repeated, tasting the name like it was something precious. For a few minutes, they simply sat there, two strangers in the dimmed cabin, bound by the stillness created by a now sleeping child. Blake watched Lily's small hand rest over Lauren's gold-striped collar, a gesture so natural it made his chest ache. "You have a way with her," Blake said, unable to hide his amazement. Lauren's smile faltered just slightly. A shadow passed behind her eyes, so quick and subtle that Blake might have missed it if he weren't looking directly at her. "I used to," she whispered. There it was again, that quiet echo of something broken beneath the surface. But before Blake could ask, a voice from behind them spoke up, a deep, amused tone from an older man. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, chuckling softly. "Admiral settles the baby faster than the whole plane put together." Laughter rippled lightly through the nearby rows. Lauren dipped her head humbly, and Blake managed a thin, grateful smile. The tension that had tightened around his heart slowly began to unwind. When the passengers settled again, Lauren glanced sideways at Blake. "Don't let their reactions get to you," she said. "You're not the first parent to feel overwhelmed," I know, Blake replied, though his voice revealed he wasn't convinced. "But sometimes it feels like I'm failing." Lauren's expression shifted, stern but compassionate. "Failure isn't what I saw," she said quietly. What I saw was a father who refused to give up even when he was exhausted. That's not failure. That's devotion. Blake swallowed hard, caught off guard by the weight of her sincerity. Most days he admitted, "I feel like I'm barely holding it together." "Then hold it together one breath at a time," she replied. "That's all any of us can do." He opened his mouth to say more, but Lily shifted in her arms, her tiny cheek brushing against the metals on Lauren's chest. Lauren froze just for a fraction of a second, as though the touch had jolted something deep inside her. She closed her eyes, inhaling slowly, visibly collecting herself. "Sorry," Blake whispered instinctively. "Don't be," she murmured, though her voice carried that same faint tremble. She's perfect." Silence lingered, but it felt different now, gentler. Warmer, threaded with the beginning of something neither of them fully understood. At that moment, the captain's voice crackled over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be experiencing light turbulence shortly. Please return to your seats." Blake automatically reached out his hands. "I can take her." Lauren hesitated, her arms tightening almost protectively around Lily. "I can hold her through the turbulence," she said. "If you're comfortable with that." He didn't know why, but he was. More comfortable than he had felt with anyone since the night he lost Emma. "Okay," he murmured. "If you're sure." Lauren nodded. "I'm sure." The plane dipped slightly, and Lily stirred only long enough for Lauren to gently rub her back with her thumb. Then she settled again, breathing slow and even. Blake watched a strange warmth blooming in his chest. Something had shifted tonight. Something he could feel in his bones. Something no one in that cabin, not even the Admiral, could yet name. But it all began with the unthinkable. The turbulence came and went, like a passing sigh, barely enough to rattle a cup of water. Yet inside Blake Carson's chest, something far more powerful had begun to settle. He found himself watching the woman in white, Admiral Lauren Bennett, cradle Lily with a tenderness he had never expected from someone who carried medals on her chest and quiet authority in every movement. For the first time since boarding the flight, the cabin felt almost serene. The dimmed lights glowed softly across the rows, and the hum of the engines became a steady, comforting backdrop. Most passengers closed their eyes, slipping into half-sleep. A few still peeked curiously at the Admiral, as if trying to understand how she had performed what looked suspiciously like a miracle. Blake didn't blame them. He could barely understand it himself. Lauren's fingers traced small circles on Lily's back, her touch feather-gentle. Every now and then she hummed, barely audible, a soft tune that seemed to rise from somewhere deep within her, something old, something familiar, something practiced, and something heartbreakingly tender. Blake turned slightly in his seat, studying the outline of her face as she gazed down at the sleeping child. Her expression held a strange mixture of peace and ache, as though she were savoring a moment she had feared she'd never feel again. He hesitated before speaking. "That song, I've never heard it before." Lauren kept her eyes on Lily as she answered. "It's not really a song, just a habit, something I used to do." A shadow crossed her features, faint but unmistakable. Blake felt it again. That subtle resonance, the recognition of someone who carried invisible weight. "If you don't mind me asking," he said softly, "how did you know what to do with her, I mean? You handled her like you knew exactly what she needed." Lauren hesitated. It wasn't the hesitation of someone hiding something, but of someone trying to decide whether the truth was safe here in this quiet pocket of a night sky, thousands of feet above the world. She finally looked up at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know her cry," she said. "Not Lily's specifically, but that kind of cry. The kind that comes from fear, not just discomfort. Babies cry differently when they think the world is too big." Blake nodded, slowly absorbing her words. It is too big sometimes. It is, she agreed, her voice tightening slightly. Far too big. There was a silence between them, not heavy, but gentle. The silence of two people who had stopped pretending they were fine. Blake exhaled, rubbing his tired hands against his knees. Her mother used to calm her in seconds. He said the words, slipping out before he could rethink them. Emma. She had this way of making Lily feel like nothing in the world could go wrong. Lauren's expression softened. She sounds wonderful. She was, Blake said, staring at a point somewhere past the seat in front of him. We spent the whole pregnancy dreaming about being parents together. And then she was gone, before she heard Lily's first laugh. He swallowed hard, blinking rapidly. Some nights, I don't know if Lily cries because she misses something she never got to have, or because I'm failing at filling the space that's left. Lauren didn't speak immediately. She didn't offer empty words of reassurance. Instead, she adjusted Lily's blanket with the slow tenderness of someone who truly understood. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I know that kind of space. Blake turned his head. Their eyes met. Lauren breathed in deeply, her voice trembling just slightly at the edges. I had a son, she said. Michael. He was 8. Blake's chest tightened. He didn't interrupt. He loved airplanes. She continued with a fragile smile. Not the kind I flew ironically. He loved the tiny ones. Paper planes, toy jets. Everything that could fly, but didn't have to be serious. She paused, her fingers brushing Lily's hair with subconscious familiarity. He used to curl up on my lap and press his ear to my heartbeat. He'd say it sounded like home. The softness in her voice broke something open inside Blake. What happened? He asked gently. Lauren looked down at her hands at Lily sleeping so trustingly against her. I was deployed. A training accident happened back home. One of those freak things people call nobody's fault. But when you're a mother, there's no such thing as nobody's fault. Her voice cracked barely but undeniably. The day I came back, they handed me his favorite toy jet. I never heard his laugh again. Blake closed his eyes, the ache in her words slicing through him with awful clarity. I'm so sorry, he whispered. Lauren nodded once, as if accepting the words, but already carrying far more sorrow than any apology could soothe. After that, she said softly, I stopped holding babies. Not because I didn't love them, but because when you hold a child, you have to open part of your heart. And mine felt too broken to open again. She looked at Lily. Until tonight. Something inside Blake shifted. A quiet understanding settled between them, raw, fragile, but real. Two wounds recognizing each other. Two strangers connected not by circumstance, but by loss, threaded through love. She feels safe with you, Blake said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. Lauren brushed her thumb against Lily's cheek. She's the one helping me feel safe. Blake stared at her, stunned by the honesty in her words. No medals on her chest could shield her from this truth. No rank could dignify the ache she carried. He took a slow breath. I never expected someone like you, an admiral, to step in. Lauren gave a soft, almost sad smile. Rank doesn't mean much when a child is crying. She paused. And sometimes the world forgets that people in uniform bleed too. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where faint stars glimmered beyond the wing. But tonight, I heard her cry, and something inside me just moved. Blake felt his throat tighten again, not with sorrow this time, but with something like gratitude, something like hope. You gave her peace, he said. And maybe you gave me a little too. Lauren turned back to him, her eyes warm, shimmering with emotions she didn't fully hide. Sometimes she whispered the ones who need peace most are the ones who try hardest to give it. Blake didn't know whether she was talking about him or herself. Maybe both. Lily sighed in her sleep, nestling closer into Lauren's chest. The Admiral froze for a heartbeat, her lips parting in an expression Blake hadn't seen yet. Pure awe, almost reverence, as if Lily had reached into the deepest, loneliest part of her and lit a small, unexpected candle. And in that quiet, suspended moment, somewhere above a sleeping world, the wounds of two strangers breathed the same air, softened by the steady heartbeat of a child who didn't know she was healing them both. The cabin had fallen into the kind of hush that only existed on late-night flights, an unspoken agreement between strangers to let the world rest for a few hours. A soft blue glow from the overhead lights washed across the rows, giving everything a dreamy stillness. Blake sat quietly beside Admiral Lauren Bennett, unsure whether to breathe deeply or hold his breath, afraid that any sudden movement might break the fragile peace that had settled over their little corner of the plane. Lily slept soundly against Lauren's chest, now her tiny breaths warm and steady. Blake found himself watching them with a mixture of awe and disbelief. There was something magnetic about the sight, a woman in a pristine white Navy uniform adorned with medals earned from years of service, holding a baby with the tenderness of someone rediscovering a piece of their lost heart. At some point, Blake's hand drifted to adjust the edge of Lily's blanket. As he did, his sleeve slid up just enough to reveal a small, faded marking on his inner wrist, a symbol most people wouldn't recognize. A triangle enclosing a winged cross ink, worn by time and sun, nearly erased by years of deliberate hiding. Lauren's gaze shifted, instinctively trained by a lifetime of noticing details others overlooked. She froze, not with fear nor suspicion, but something closer to stunned recognition. Her voice came quiet, almost breathless. "Where did you get that?" Blake stiffened. He tugged his sleeve down, but it was too late. Her eyes had already locked onto the mark. "It's nothing," he murmured. Lauren shook her head slowly. "It's not nothing. That's a symbol from the SR Elite Reserve. Only a small group ever qualified for that unit." She paused, studying him with new eyes, eyes that saw more than the worn flannel shirt and tired face of a janitor. "You served." Blake looked away, suddenly uncomfortable under the weight of her gaze. He had spent years trying to bury that part of his life. Those intense years filled with adrenaline and danger when he believed he could save everyone if he simply tried hard enough. But life had proven him painfully wrong. "Not for very long," he said quietly. I didn't stay." Lauren's brows drew together, not in judgment, but in a kind of baffled compassion. "Why would someone like you quit a unit like that? People fight for years, just to get a chance." Blake exhaled slowly. The truth always sat like a stone in his chest. "Life happened. I met Emma. We were young, and I thought, maybe I could be something more than a uniform." He brushed a hand through his hair. "And then the economy tanked. Jobs were scarce. She got pregnant with Lily, and I needed stability. Permanent assignments weren't guaranteed. So I left, took different jobs, eventually ended up doing night shifts on the base because it was steady, and it let me be home with her during the day." Lauren listened, her expression softening with every word. "People don't leave that unit because they're weak," she said. "They leave because life calls them to serve somewhere else." Blake let out a humorless breath. "Scrubbing floors doesn't feel like serving anyone." Lauren looked at him sharply, her tone unexpectedly firm. "Service isn't about rank or glamour. It's about showing up when the world needs you. Sometimes that's on a battlefield. Sometimes that's in a hospital room. And sometimes—" she glanced down at Lily. "Sometimes it's holding a child together, with nothing but love and grit." Her words hit him like a warm wave, steady, honest, undeserved, but deeply needed. "You don't even know me," Blake whispered. Lauren tilted her head. I know enough. Her eyes moved to the faded tattoo again. Anyone who earned that mark has courage woven into their bones. It doesn't go away just because life took a different direction. He swallowed. For years he had carried shame about leaving the military, about not being the man he once thought he'd be. But hearing her say it, that it didn't erase who he was, felt like someone setting a broken bone back into place. She studied his face, as if reading truths he didn't dare voice. I think you judge yourself too harshly. Blake gave a small, exhausted laugh. It's hard not to when the world already judges you plenty. What the world sees, Lauren said softly, is rarely the whole story. She glanced at Lily, still sleeping soundly in her arms. Babies see the truth faster than adults. They don't care about rank or job titles. They care about safety, warmth, and tension. Her voice gentled further. And she adores you. Something in Blake's chest loosened. He had no idea how she saw all of that with such clarity, but she did. Lauren brushed her thumb across the tattoo one more time, not touching it, just observing it with quiet reverence. These marks don't fade, she said. Not really. They change shape, maybe. But the meaning stays. Blake stared at her, feeling seen in a way he hadn't in years. What about you? He asked softly. You wear so many medals, and yet tonight, you look like someone carrying more than any uniform could hold. Lauren inhaled deeply, then exhaled with a shiver of honesty. Medals don't protect you from grief, she said. They tell the world you're strong, but they don't tell the world what it cost you. Her gaze drifted to the window. The dark sky stretched, endlessly dotted with faint stars. I've spent years living behind these medals, convincing myself that being strong meant shutting every door that hurt to open. But holding her, she looked down at Lily, voice cracking slightly. It's the first time in a long while I've felt something other than the weight. Blake felt his breath catch. He didn't know what to say. Didn't know if saying anything would break the fragile honesty blooming between them. He finally murmured, I'm glad she gave you a moment of peace. Lauren's eyes glistened in the dim light. She didn't just give me peace, she whispered. She reminded me I'm still capable of feeling something other than duty. Silence settled gently between them, deep, raw, and strangely comforting. Then Lauren turned to him again, her voice steady but soft. Blake, the world didn't break you. You just learned to carry things quietly. His breath faltered. And you, he whispered, you've carried things loudly, because you had no choice. Lauren offered him a small, trembling smile, the kind you give only when your heart recognizes another heart, finally safe enough to be honest. And for the first time since the plane lifted off, Blake felt the strange, soothing certainty that fate had placed this moment, deliberately. Two wounded souls seated next to each other, in the dim blue glow, sharing truths neither had intended to reveal. A baby sleeping peacefully between them, a mark from the past, and the beginning of something neither could yet name. For a long stretch of time, the flight drifted through the night with a smoothness that made the cabin feel almost suspended outside the world. The gentle hum of the engines blended with the quiet breaths of passengers who had surrendered to sleep. Even the overhead lights seemed softer, casting a warm glow across Admiral Lauren Bennett's uniform, and the tiny baby curled trustingly against her. Lily had not stirred once, not even a whimper. To Blake, it felt like watching a miracle unfolding in real time. He had never seen his daughter this peaceful with a stranger, let alone someone whose presence radiated the kind of disciplined power Lauren carried. Lily was usually perceptive in ways that surprised him, sensitive, easily startled by unfamiliar voices. But in the Admiral's arms, she slept as though she had found a haven carved specifically for her tiny, searching heart. Lauren adjusted Lily gently, the movement so natural it made Blake wonder how many times she had done this before her world cracked open. There was something in her eyes, a softness, wrapped in longing, that told him this moment was deeply personal. Not just kindness, not just instinct, but memory. A memory that hurt and healed her at the same time. "She fits right here," Lauren murmured, barely audible. Her voice carried the fragile awe of a woman who hadn't held a child in far too long. Like she belongs. Blake felt a lump form in his throat. She really likes you." Lauren glanced at him, her lips curving with a sadness too tender to hide. "I like her too." Lily stirred then, not from distress, but from comfort. Her little hand lifted, brushing blindly across Lauren's collar. Her fingers found the gold service ribbons pinned near Lauren's heart, and she tapped them with gentle curiosity. Lauren froze. Blake watched, breath caught in his chest, as the Admiral's face shifted just slightly but unmistakably. Something warm and wounded flickered through her eyes. She wrapped her free hand around Lily's, guiding her tiny fingers away from the sharp edges of the metal. "She always does that," Blake whispered. "She reaches for things that shine. Emma used to call her our little firefly." Lauren's throat tightened. "Michael used to do this too. He'd touch my medals like they were toys instead of symbols. Drove the officers crazy when he was a toddler." She let out a soft, wistful chuckle. "He insisted I wore too many stickers." Blake smiled gently. "Sounds like he was a bright kid." "He was my whole world," Lauren whispered. Lily's hand, as if responding to the quiver in Lauren's voice, found the empty space just above the ribbons, where the fabric of the uniform was warmest, closest to the Admiral's heartbeat. Lauren swallowed hard. Her breath stuttered softly. Blake could see her fighting to steady herself. "You know," she said with a strained smile, "I haven't felt a child's hand on me like this in years." Blake hesitated, choosing his words with care. "It must bring back a lot." "It does." Her voice wavered. "More than I expected." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence felt sacred, like the quiet between two church bells vibrating with meaning, even though no sound was made. Blake let his eyes soften. "She's good at making people feel things." Lauren brushed her thumb against Lily's tiny fingers. "She's good at reminding people they're still human." A flight attendant passed by, slowed, and smiled with genuine warmth. "She's a natural with your baby, sir." Blake shook his head. "Not mine. Just someone kind helping us out." Lauren looked up. "Tonight." "I think she is ours, for at least a moment." The comment was light, nearly playful, but something in the warmth of her voice tugged at Blake unexpectedly. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It wasn't flirtation. It was something gentler, deeper, a kind of shared guardianship born not from intention but from emotional gravity. As the flight attendant moved away, Blake leaned back in his seat. The exhaustion of the day pressed upon him, but the sight beside him, Lauren holding Lily, kept him awake, wrapped in unexpected comfort. "She trusts you," he said again, emphasizing it this time. "She almost never does that right away." Lauren traced a gentle path along Lily's back with her fingers. Children sense who's carrying truth and who's carrying fear. "And what do you think I'm carrying?" Blake asked softly. Lauren turned her head, studying him in the dim light. "Grief," she said. "And love. The kind that doesn't disappear even when you're drowning." Blake's breath hitched. "You see all that, I've lived it," she replied simply. He nodded slowly. "And what about you? What are you carrying?" Lauren looked down again, her hand tightening around Lily's. "Duty, guilt, and memories I'm afraid to open." Blake exhaled. "That's a heavy load." A small, ironic smile curved her lips. "We're both carrying heavy things." "But look." She tilted her head toward Lily. She doesn't care. She just rests. Maybe she trusts us, Blake whispered. Maybe we're learning to trust each other, Lauren said just as softly. The words lingered in the air, warm and unexpected. At that moment, Lily shifted again, her soft cheek brushing the base of Lauren's throat. The Admiral froze, utterly still, as though the simple touch had broken through something inside her. I forgot, she whispered, eyes glistening what it felt like to have a small life rely on you. Blake felt something break open in his chest. You haven't lost that part of you. Lauren's jaw tensed with emotion. I thought I had. Lily made a tiny sound, a contented little sigh, then rested deeper against the warmth of Lauren's uniform. That sound, Lauren murmured, voice unsteady. He used to make that sound. Blake reached out instinctively, not touching her, not crossing any boundary, but resting his hand on the armrest between them, close enough that she could feel the quiet solidarity he offered. I'm glad she reminds you of joy, he said. Not just pain. Lauren turned toward him, and in her eyes, he saw something unexpected: gratitude. Not the polite kind. The real heartfelt kind that comes only when someone has been given a piece of their past they thought they had lost forever. Lily's hand slid across Lauren's collar again, this time resting peacefully over the medal she once wore with pride, but now carried with the weight of memory. Lauren covered that tiny hand with her own. She's healing something in me, she whispered. Blake nodded. She's doing the same for me. For a moment, the three of them existed in a pocket of stillness. An admiral carrying both authority and heartbreak, a father carrying both love and exhaustion, and a child carrying a quiet, unexplainable wisdom. A connection none of them expected, a connection none of them sought. Yet somehow, a connection that felt inevitable. The first hint of dawn brushed gently against the airplane windows, tinting the cabin with a faint silver-blue glow. It signaled the approach of Seattle, a city still half asleep beneath a veil of early morning mist. As the plane descended, gradually, most passengers began to stir, rubbing tired eyes, stretching stiff limbs, whispering to one another in groggy voices. But in row 17, time moved differently. Blake Carson sat silently watching Admiral Lauren Bennett cradle his daughter with a tenderness that still left him breathless. Lily had slept for nearly the entire flight, nestled against Lauren's chest, rising and falling with the Admiral's steady breathing, as though she had known this heart her whole life. Now, as the engines shifted pitch in preparation for landing, Lily stirred. Her tiny hand curled instinctively toward the warmth beneath her cheek. Lauren tightened her hold, giving a small, instinctive sway, a mother's motion born from muscle memory she hadn't used in years. Blake absorbed every detail, with a heart both full and aching. She'll wake soon, Lauren whispered, her voice still textured with the softness of the night. She's had the best sleep she's had in weeks, Blake replied, unable to mask the gratitude in his tone. I don't know how you did it. Lauren shook her head gently. She did it. I just remembered how to hold on. The way she said it made Blake's chest tighten. She wasn't just talking about the baby. The captain's voice crackled through the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our final descent into Seattle shortly. Please make sure your seatbelts are securely fastened. The cabin brightened by a fraction. Passengers adjusted luggage, closed trays, and straightened in their seats. The quiet bubble surrounding the three of them began to shrink, replaced by reality closing in. And Blake felt something he didn't expect. A fear of losing this moment, of losing her. Lauren lifted her gaze slowly, as if sensing the shift in him. She's waking. Lily's eyelids fluttered open, revealing sleepy, hazy eyes. She blinked once, twice, then looked directly into Lauren's face. There was no confusion, no fear. Instead, she reached up with a tiny hand, touching Lauren's chin with the kind of trust that only children could give so freely. Lauren inhaled sharply. Blake saw her eyes glisten. "Hey, sweetheart," Lauren murmured, her voice thick. "Good morning." Lily made a soft sound, half yawn, half coo, and her small body stretched against Lauren's uniform. The Admiral traced a gentle pattern along Lily's back, fighting visibly to keep her composure. Blake leaned closer. "You okay?" Lauren nodded, but her breath trembled. "I forgot what this feels like. To wake up with a little one in your arms." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "It's harder than I thought." He didn't need to ask why. The answer lived between every syllable she spoke. The plane dipped slightly, nudging them closer to the ground. Lily shifted again, and for the first time since boarding the plane, Lauren reluctantly began to reposition her. "I should give her back," she said, though her arms didn't seem ready to let go. Blake extended his hand slowly. "Only if you're ready." Lauren let out a breath that carried years of unspoken grief. Then, with exquisite care, she transferred Lily into Blake's waiting arms. Lily whimpered briefly, but only for a moment. She settled quickly against her father's chest, still warm from Lauren's embrace. As soon as the baby left her arms, Lauren's hands remained suspended midair for a heartbeat, as though trying to memorize the shape of the weight she no longer held. Then she lowered them to her lap, clasping them tightly together. Blake offered a quiet smile. "You were amazing with her." Lauren looked away, blinking rapidly. She felt like home. The landing gear rumbled beneath them. The plane tilted forward, drawing closer to the runway. Outside, the lights of Seattle glimmered faintly beneath the morning haze. Lauren inhaled deeply, reaching into her pocket. When her hand emerged, she held a small, plain white card, a military-issue contact card, simple but unmistakably formal. She hesitated only a second before offering it to him. "If you ever need someone to hold her for a few minutes," she said softly. "Or if you ever need anything." She swallowed. "I'm usually at Garden Deck West Shore Naval Base, mostly evenings. It's quiet there." Blake took the card with reverence he didn't fully understand. "Thank you," he murmured. "Really?" The plane touched down with a gentle jolt. Wheels screeched softly, the cabin shuddered, and a round of relieved exhalations rippled through the passengers. But something else happened, at the same moment. Something small, but monumental. Lily turned her head. She stared at Lauren, her lips parted. And she reached out. "Ma." The sound was soft. Half a word, but unmistakable. Lauren froze completely. Her eyes widened. Her breath hitched, her hand flew to her mouth. Tears rose instantly unguarded, shining under the cabin lights. Blake looked down at Lily, stunned. She's never said that before. Not like that. Lily reached farther, her fingers opening and closing her tiny face, tightening with effort, as if she were calling someone she knew, someone she trusted, someone she remembered from another life. "Ma." Lauren's heart broke open. Without thinking, she reached out and touched Lily's hand, her fingertips trembling. "Sweetheart," she whispered. Blake watched, not with confusion, but with awe. The moment felt too big for explanation, too sacred to interrupt. A few passengers who overheard gasped softly. One woman pressed a hand to her chest. Another wiped tears from her eyes. The plane rolled toward the gate, but for Blake and Lauren, time stood still. When the seatbelt sign dimmed, the usual rustle of passengers rising filled the cabin. Bags were pulled from overhead bins, jackets draped over arms, sleepy faces blinking awake. But in row 17, there was only silence. Only the fragile connection between a baby reaching into the world with new hope and a woman who thought she had lost the ability to be reached. Lauren wiped her eyes quickly, as though embarrassed by her reaction. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Don't be," Blake said gently. "Please don't be." He held Lily closer but stepped slightly aside, giving Lauren room to brush her fingers against Lily's hand, one last time. "She sees something in you," he murmured. Lauren shook her head, her voice trembling. "No. She remembers something in me." The weight of her words lodged itself deep inside Blake's chest. The passengers began to file out. Lauren rose, adjusting her uniform, regaining the composed posture of an admiral, but her eyes were still warm, still watery, still changed. "Take care of her," she whispered. "I always try," Blake replied. Lauren gave him one last look, full of gratitude, sorrow, and something new neither of them dared name. Then she stepped into the aisle and walked away, her white uniform glowing softly under the morning lights. Blake watched her until she disappeared through the cabin door. And Lily, still in his arms, stared at the empty space she left behind, her tiny hand reaching for a woman who had touched her life and his in the span of a single unforgettable flight. Seattle in early spring had a way of sinking quietly into your bones. Soft rain on rooftops, dim gray mornings, evenings that carried the scent of the ocean. For Blake Carson, those months after the flight blurred together into a rhythm equal parts comforting and suffocating. He woke early, fed Lily, carried her out into the fog, and walked to the small daycare near the naval base before heading into his night shifts. Being a janitor wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, predictable. And in a life turned upside down, predictability mattered. Still, every night when Blake polished the long hallways outside the command offices, he found himself wondering, was she inside? Was Admiral Lauren Bennett somewhere behind those steel doors, carrying her own routine with the same quiet ache he did? He never went near Garden Deck. Not once. Not even to take a shortcut. He kept Lauren's contact card tucked carefully inside his wallet, tucked between Lily's birth certificate and a faded photo of Emma laughing beneath summer light. The card felt heavier than it should, like it carried 100 possibilities Blake was too afraid to reach for. Every time he touched it, he heard the faint echo of Lily's voice on the plane. Ma, that soft, fragile syllable that had shattered something inside all three of them. But he told himself it was coincidence. A sound, nothing more. A baby's random attempt at forming words. He had to believe that. Anything else, anything deeper, felt too dangerous, too hopeful. Most days passed in silence. Nights passed in exhaustion. But then there were the moments in between. One chilly evening, Blake came home worn down from a double shift. His shoulders ached, his eyes burned, and his mind kept looping back to the look on Lauren's face when Lily reached for her. He set Lily on the living room rug with her toys, trying to shake the memory. She giggled, banging a plastic block on the floor. Then she suddenly grabbed her stuffed bear, held it up and chirped. La 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 la. Blake froze. La la, he repeated softly. Who's that, sweetheart? Lily grinned, hugged the bear, and rocked back and forth the same way Lauren had rocked her on the plane. Blake's breath caught. His chest tightened. His heart didn't know what to do with that. He picked her up, pressing her tiny, warm body close. You remember her, don't you? Somehow. You do. Lily touched his cheek, repeating the sound more clearly now. La. Ren. Blake nearly dropped to his knees. He tried to laugh it off, tried to convince himself she was imitating something from daycare, but deep down he knew. Babies didn't cling to memories with logic. They clung with heart. And Lily's heart had made its choice. Meanwhile, across the city, Admiral Lauren Bennett moved through her days with the precision of a leader and the heaviness of a woman, trying to keep her chest from caving in. Meetings, briefings, evaluations. Her schedule ran like clockwork. But for the first time in years, she found her discipline slipping. Some mornings, she stood at her office window longer than she should, staring at the water beyond West Shore Naval Base. The horizon brought no comfort, only a dull ache. The ache of wanting to hear a baby's laugh again. The ache of wanting to feel tiny fingers curl around her collar. The ache of wanting to be needed in a way no rank could ever satisfy. Her officers noticed the change in her, not in words, but in the softness of her voice when someone mentioned family. In the way she paused when she walked past the daycare program near the community center. In the way her gaze drifted whenever she heard a child's cry echo across the base. But no one mentioned it. Admirals deserved silence when their hearts cracked. Lauren kept her uniform immaculate, her commands sharp, her posture perfect. She kept her medals in place, her reports flawless, her expression unreadable. But sometimes, late at night, she found herself sitting alone in her quarters, holding the tiny plastic jet her son once loved. She turned it in her hands the way she once turned her pain, trying to understand it, trying to outgrow it, trying desperately to forget the sweetness of holding a child against her. But she couldn't, because now she remembered again. Because a baby girl with dark curls and soft eyes had pressed her tiny cheek to Lauren's heart during a night flight between two cities, and something dormant inside her had come alive. Something she had buried with her son. Something she couldn't lose again. Every evening she walked to Garden Deck, the quiet overlook near the edge of the naval base. She told herself it was for the breeze, for the view, for the space to breathe. But deep down, she knew. She was waiting. She was waiting for a father and his little girl who never came. Every night she told herself she was foolish, that maybe Blake had thrown away her card, that maybe the moment on the plane had meant more to her than it ever had to him, that maybe their connection was nothing more than grief, recognizing grief. Still she returned, every night, like tied to shore, because something inside her whispered, one day they might come. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and the deck stayed empty. Back on the other side of the city, Blake continued waking to long nights and early mornings. Some days he felt strong, other days he felt hollowed out. But every day, without fail, he wondered, should I go? Would I take Lily to Garden Deck? Should I let myself believe there might be something waiting there? But then fear stepped in. Fear of hope. Fear of repeating loss. Fear of opening anything closed. So he stayed home. He kept his distance. And every night after putting Lily to sleep, he closed his eyes and saw Lauren in her white uniform. Lily resting against her, the sound of one tiny word echoing through the cabin. Ma. It haunted him, comforted him, destroyed him. He didn't know which, but the emptiness between them grew heavier with every passing day. In the end, the longing didn't fade. It deepened. It carved out space in both their hearts, a space shaped exactly like the moment they shared, a space neither could fill with anything else, a space that was slowly becoming unbearable, and neither of them realized it not yet, but the quiet months were almost over. Destiny was already moving, just not in the way either of them expected. Seattle's rain came in soft sheets that night, tapping steadily against the apartment windows, like a gentle insistence from the sky, steady, unrelenting, impossible to ignore. Blake Carson stood in the small kitchen of his one-bedroom apartment, bouncing Lily against his chest, as if his arms were the only harbor she had left in the world. But Lily was inconsolable. She wasn't screaming. It wasn't that desperate cry from the airplane. What she gave tonight was different. A trembling, aching cry that came from somewhere deeper. Somewhere Blake didn't know how to reach. "Hey, hey!" "Daddy's right here," he whispered, pacing back and forth. His voice was tired, frayed at the edges. "Come on, sweetheart, what's wrong? You're fed, you're dry, you're warm. Daddy's doing everything he can." She pressed her tiny hands against his shirt, as if searching for something that wasn't there. Her face glistened with tears. Her breath hitched in short, panicked gasps. Every sob seemed to tear at Blake's chest, as though she were grieving something she didn't have words for. "I know, baby," he murmured. "I know it's hard." He had seen her fussy before. He had seen her overtired, frightened, startled, overstimulated. But this wasn't any of those things. This was a longing Blake didn't understand, a deep-rooted ache, raw and quiet, like she was missing someone she couldn't forget. Someone she had only met once. Someone who had held her like she mattered. An hour passed. Then another. Blake tried everything, rocking her, singing to her, walking in circles around the apartment until his legs shook. Lily's tears soaked into his shirt, her little heart beating rapidly as she pressed her head beneath his chin. He kissed the top of her head. "Sweetheart." "Daddy's trying." Finally, exhausted and desperate, he sat down on the couch. Lily's sobs quieted for a moment as she looked up at him with wide, watery eyes. Then softly, tremulously, she made a sound. "La." Blake's heart stopped. Lily reached toward the air, her hand trembling with memory. "La. La." The same sound she had made on the plane. The same sound she had whispered as she reached for Admiral Lauren Bennett. Blake felt his breath catch in his throat. "No," he whispered, shaking his head, as if trying to protect them both from the truth. You can't be asking for her." But Lily wasn't done. She pressed her hand over her little heart and rocked, mimicking the exact motion Lauren had used on the plane. Her fingers brushed Blake's collar, the same way she had touched Lauren's medals. Then she whimpered again. "Ma." "Ren." The word, broken but clear, pierced Blake straight through. He froze completely. His world stilled. He wasn't imagining it. He wasn't mishearing. He wasn't projecting his own longing onto her. Lily remembered Lauren. She missed her. She was calling for her. Blake closed his eyes, overwhelmed by a wave of emotion he didn't have the strength to hold back. He pressed Lily closer, his chin trembling against her soft hair. "Oh, sweetheart," he whispered, voice cracking. "You really did choose her." Lily's tiny fingers clung to his shirt, then reached outward again toward a space Blake could almost see as clearly as if Lauren were standing there in the living room. "Ma," Lily cried. Not Mama, not Mother. Something else. Someone else. Lauren. The truth broke open inside him like dawn after a long night. She remembers the one moment she felt truly safe. She remembers the woman who calmed her. She remembers the heartbeat she slept against for hours. Blake's breath shook. He hadn't let himself imagine what it would mean for Lily to have connected with Lauren that deeply. He hadn't let himself imagine what it might mean for him, for them. But now the truth was undeniable. Lily wasn't just crying. She was longing. And suddenly Blake realized so was he. Not in the same way, not with the same innocence or instinct, but in the quiet hours of each day, in the heaviness that settled into his chest, every night in the soft ache that pulled him toward the memory of Lauren's gentle voice. He had missed her too. Missed her steadiness. Missed the compassion in her eyes. Missed the moment she made him feel seen. Really seen for the first time in years. But fear had kept him away. Fear of attachment. Fear of hope. Fear of losing someone again. And now he was watching his baby girl grieve because of his fear. Blake swallowed hard. "I'm sorry, Lily. I should have..." His voice faltered. What he should have called, he should have gone to Garden Deck. He should have trusted that the kind of connection they all felt wasn't imaginary. He had been so afraid of hoping for more that he'd let his daughter cry for what she'd already knew she wanted. Lily whimpered again, hiccuping through her tears. Wren. The sound finished breaking him. Blake pressed his forehead gently to hers, closing his eyes with a deep, trembling breath. "You miss her," he whispered. "You really miss her." Lily nodded an unsteady, baby-sized nod that sent a new wave of tears down Blake's face. He held her tight, rocking her gently, feeling her small fingers cling to him as though begging him to understand. And he did. He finally did. Lily wasn't crying because she was hungry, or tired, or lonely. She was crying because her heart, small as it was, had recognized something true, something pure, something irreplaceable. She had found comfort in Lauren. She had found safety. She had found a bond she couldn't explain, a bond Blake had been too afraid to nurture. He kissed her forehead, letting his tears fall freely now. "Okay," he whispered, voice breaking with surrender. "Okay, sweetheart. Daddy hears you." He stood slowly, cradling her with renewed resolve. "If you remember her," he whispered, brushing a tear from her cheek, "then maybe it means something. Maybe it's meant to." Lily hiccup laughed, a strange mix of relief and sorrow, and laid her head against his chest. Blake looked toward the rain-soaked window, heart pounding with fear, hope, and 1,000 quiet regrets. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, he would find his courage. Tomorrow, he would stop hiding behind fear. Tomorrow, he would go to Garden Deck. Not for himself. Not even for Lauren. But for the little girl in his arms, the one whose tiny voice had chosen love long before he dared to. The next morning broke with a pale, forgiving light, a kind of gray-blue calm that only Seattle could offer after a night of heavy rain. The sidewalks glistened with leftover droplets, and mist curled like soft breath around the streetlights. Blake Carson stepped out of his apartment holding Lily close against his chest, her tiny fingers curled around the collar of his jacket, as if she sensed something important was about to happen. He didn't sleep much, not after hearing her call for Lauren with such unmistakable longing, not after feeling something inside himself, something long dormant, snap open with quiet understanding. Today was the day. He wasn't dressed sharply, not like someone going to meet an admiral. He wore a clean flannel shirt jeans that had faded from years of overuse, and shoes as worn as his heart. But Lily was dressed in her soft pink outfit, the one with the tiny embroidered stars Emma had chosen during pregnancy, as if she knew one day her daughter might meet someone who wore stars on her shoulders. Blake kissed the top of Lily's head, inhaling the warm scent of baby shampoo. "You ready, sweetheart?" Lily looked up with sleepy anticipation and murmured, "Wren." That was all the confirmation he needed. The West Shore Naval Base gleamed with disciplined precision as Blake approached the gates. The guards recognized him. After all, he worked the night shift here, and they waved him through with polite nods. But once he stepped inside, his breath caught. He had forgotten how vast the place felt in the daylight. The sea stretched endlessly beyond the buildings, the water shimmering under the rising sun. Personnel walked briskly along the paths, young sailors, seasoned officers, civilians in uniform. The distant sound of gulls echoed faintly above. But Blake wasn't here for the base. He was here for the quiet corner of it. Garden Deck. It wasn't much, just a secluded overlook near the western edge of the base with benches facing the water and wind-swept roses planted around the railing. It was peaceful, almost sacred, and not many people visited unless they needed a breath of solitude. He and Lily made their way across the base, his steps slowing as he neared the pathway, lined with tall juniper shrubs leading to the deck. His heart beat hard enough to make him lightheaded. What if she wasn't there? What if she didn't want to see them? What if the moment on the plane had meant something only in the air? Only for one night, only under the cover of darkness. What if he whispered to himself, "You're about to make a fool of yourself"? But Lily nestled against his chest, suddenly lifted her head, pointed forward, and whispered with breathy urgency, "La. La." Her tiny hand opened and closed with purpose. Blake looked up. Lauren was there, standing alone at the railing facing the water, white uniform pressed and immaculate, hair pulled back with military precision, shoulders straight, posture perfect, but her clasped hands trembled ever so slightly. She hadn't spotted him yet. She seemed lost in thought, her eyes scanning the horizon, as if searching for something the sea could return to her. Blake's breath shuddered out of him. He took one step, then another. Lily leaned forward in his arms, her voice breaking into a trembling cry of recognition. "Ma." Lauren turned. Her breath caught like someone had struck her with all the memories she had tried to bury. Her eyes widened, her lips parted, her hand flew to her chest. She looked at Blake, then at Lily, and Blake saw something inside her collapse and rise in the same heartbeat. "Lily?" she whispered, barely audible. Blake swallowed, stepping closer. We came by. She asked for you." Lauren blinked. Her composure, usually unshakable, fractured instantly. She walked toward them slowly, as if afraid sudden movement would break the fragile reality unfolding before her. When she stopped, inches away, Lily reached out with both hands. No hesitation. No shyness, only certainty. "Ma." Lauren's breath trembled. "Sweetheart." Blake gently shifted Lily into Lauren's waiting arms. The moment Lily settled against her, the tension in Lauren's face melted. She cradled the baby with a reverence that bordered on sacred. Her eyes welled instantly, tears gathering faster than she could contain them. "I didn't think," she choked. "I didn't think you'd come." Blake rubbed the back of his neck, his own voice rough. "I wasn't sure if I should. I didn't want to cross any lines." Lauren shook her head, not tearing her gaze from Lily. "You couldn't. Not with her. Not after." Her voice broke. "Not after that flight." Lily touched Lauren's collar exactly as she had on the plane, settling into her arms, as though the weeks apart had never happened. Lauren closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath. "I came here every evening," she whispered. "I waited. But I didn't want to hope." Blake's chest tightened with a mixture of guilt and something deeper. I was afraid, he admitted. Afraid of reading too much into it. Afraid of hoping, too. For a moment there was nothing but the quiet sound of water lapping against the shore and the soft coo Lily made as she pressed her cheek against Lauren's heart. Lauren opened her eyes slowly. "You're here now," she said, simply. Blake nodded. "We are." They stood together like that, two lives merging, hesitant but undeniable, drawn together by a baby who understood more than either of them dared to admit. After a long silence, Lauren finally asked, her voice barely steady, "Would you walk with me?" "Just for a little while?" Blake exhaled, relief washing over him. "Yeah," he said softly. "I'd like that." Lauren's lips curved into the smallest, most fragile smile, a smile that carried both gratitude and rediscovery. They walked along the deck, side by side, Lily occasionally reaching up to brush Lauren's jaw or tug at her collar, making Lauren laugh, a sound Blake had not heard, before warm and vulnerable. If someone had looked from afar, they would have seen a picture so gentle, so unexpectedly perfect, it might have seemed like a family framed against the sea. And maybe, just maybe, the universe knew exactly what it was doing. Because this wasn't where their story ended. It was where it truly began. The breeze along garden deck carried a soft chill, just enough to make the air feel alive, sharp, with the scent of salt and evergreen. The water below shimmered under the late morning sun, broken only by the rhythmic ripple of returning patrol boats. It was quiet here, almost reverent, a place built for reflection, not command. Blake and Lauren walked slowly along the deck side by side, with Lily resting contentedly against Lauren's shoulder. Every now and then, Lily would reach up to touch the Admiral's cheek, and each time Lauren's eyes softened in a way that made something inside Blake ache and bloom at the same time. They found a bench near the railing, a simple wooden seat weathered by years of sea air. Lauren sat first, cradling Lily carefully, as if the child were a fragile poem she was afraid to crease. Blake sat beside them, his hands clasped between his knees, unsure if he was holding himself up or grounding himself. For several long seconds, none of them spoke. Lily reached out and tugged gently on a loose strand of Lauren's hair. Lauren laughed, a sound low and warm, carrying a tenderness she hadn't shown anyone in years. "You're quite the little officer today," she murmured, pressing a soft kiss to the crown of Lily's head. Blake watched them mesmerized. "She missed you," he said quietly. "More than I realized." Lauren's smile wavered. Her eyes drifted to Lily's tiny fingers gripping the edge of her uniform collar. "I missed her too," she whispered. Her voice carried a truth so deep, so unguarded, that Blake felt something shift inside him, an invisible door opening. He swallowed. "I'm sorry it took me this long to come." Lauren looked at him with a steadiness that felt like sunlight after rain. "People move at the pace of their wounds," she said softly. "There's no shame in that." Blake exhaled, tension releasing from his shoulders. "I was afraid." "I was too," she admitted. "Still am." That surprised him. "You afraid?" Lauren gave a small, self-conscious laugh. "I know. Admiral Bennett isn't supposed to admit fear. But grief doesn't care about rank." Blake turned slightly, his voice low. "What scares you most?" She looked out toward the open water before answering. "That if I let myself feel something again, I'll lose it, just like before." Blake nodded slowly. "I get that more than you know." Lauren's gaze settled on him. "Then tell me." His breath trembled. He rubbed his palms against his jeans, gathering the courage she had somehow given him permission to find. "When Emma died," he began quietly, "I felt like I'd been split open, like I was carrying half a life instead of a whole one." He paused. "I told myself loving someone again would dishonor her, or hurt more than I could survive." Lauren nodded, her eyes gentle. "Grief teaches us to fear joy." And Lily Blake continued looking down at his daughter, "Is the only reason I kept going. But even then, I was scared of failing her." "You haven't failed her," Lauren said firmly. "Not once." Blake's breath hitched. "Some nights it feels like I'm just barely holding us together." Lauren placed her hand gently over with her touch, warm and steady. "Holding your child together with nothing but your love. That's not barely. That's everything." He swallowed hard. Her hand remained over his, bridging a connection they had both been circling around for months. "What about you?" he asked. "What keeps you from opening up?" Her gaze dropped to Lily, who was tracing the outline of Lauren's ribbons with tiny, curious fingers. Lauren inhaled deeply. "After Michael died, I built walls. High ones, thick ones. I convinced myself that opening my heart again was dangerous." A pause. "But then a baby cried on a plane, and my walls didn't even slow her down." Blake felt emotion rise in his chest, sharp and unmistakable. "She did something to me too," he admitted. "When she said your name, it felt like she was telling me to stop hiding." Lauren blinked hard, her voice barely audible. Maybe she was telling both of us. Lily nestled closer into Lauren's arms, as if giving her silent agreement. A long silence followed, gentle, warm, filled with words neither of them had spoken aloud. Finally, Lauren whispered, "I thought my heart was finished. But you two walked back into my life like a second chance." Blake felt his throat tighten, and I thought mine had closed forever. But you, he stopped, breath trembling. You made it feel possible again. Lauren's eyes glistened. Blake, I'm not rushing anything. I don't expect anything. But I want you to know, being near you and Lily, it doesn't hurt. It feels like coming home to a room I forgot existed. Blake turned toward her fully, now his voice deep and honest. I don't know what the future looks like. I don't know if I'm ready for everything at once. But I know I don't want to walk away again. Lauren's breath caught. And if there's even a chance, Blake continued softly, that Lily chose you because she saw something true in you, then maybe I need to trust what she saw. Lily babbled softly, patting Lauren's shoulder, as if confirming her father's words. Lauren looked down at the baby, this small, miraculous bridge between their wounded hearts, and something in her chest softened completely. I've spent years feeling like my heart was locked shut, she said. But you too. You opened something I thought was gone forever. And I don't want to lose that. Blake nodded, a slow, almost disbelieving smile forming. Then maybe we just take this. One breath at a time. Lauren returned the smile, tender and hopeful. That sounds like a pace I can handle. Lily giggled suddenly, a bright, joyful sound that seemed to lift the entire deck with its innocence. She pressed her forehead against Lauren's cheek, babbling something unintelligible, but filled with love. Lauren closed her eyes, overwhelmed. She feels like mine, she whispered. Blake swallowed hard, the truth ringing through him. Maybe some things don't need explanations. They sat together for a long time, watching the water breathing in rhythm, not rushing, not forcing, simply allowing the fragile, precious connection between them to grow. And somewhere in that quiet morning light, two hearts that had once been shattered began to stitch themselves back together, one breath at a time. The days that followed felt different, subtle at first like the shift of a tide, then stronger, warmer, more certain, like a golden morning pushing back a long night. What began on the plain and rekindled at garden deck grew quietly, naturally, with a sincerity neither Blake nor Lauren expected to feel again in their lifetimes. There was no grand announcement, no declarations, just small moments, gentle, unforced, where their lives slipped closer together until separation felt unnatural. On Saturday mornings, Lauren would meet Blake and Lily at a small cafe near the waterfront, the kind with wooden benches and lamps that glowed like warm honey. Lily would squeal and reach for Lauren the moment she walked through the door, tiny arms outstretched, as if she had known her for years. Lauren always melted her discipline, her rank, her formidable composure, dissolving into a softness Blake could hardly believe belonged to the same woman who commanded fleets. She'd sweep Lily into her arms, burying her face in the baby's hair, with the kind of joy that made bystanders smile without knowing why. You spoil her, Blake teased one morning, as Lauren handed Lily a small sticker shaped like a golden star. Lauren smirked. I've earned a few stars in my life. I can give one away. Lily pressed the sticker to Lauren's cheek. Lauren laughed, a warm, unguarded sound Blake wanted to bottle. It wasn't just Lily who came alive in these moments. Blake did too. He felt lighter, steadier, as if a weight he'd carried for months had lifted. He watched Lauren move, how she held Lily, how she listened when he spoke, how she allowed space for his vulnerability without crowding it. And he felt something he hadn't felt since Emma's passing. Not guilt, not confusion, but permission. Permission to breathe, permission to hope, permission to be more than a man barely getting by. Sundays belonged to quiet rituals, long walks along the pier, lunch at a small seafood shack Lauren loved, and always, always, the moment Lily fell asleep on Lauren's shoulder, small fingers tangled in the Admiral's collar as though claiming her. One Sunday, as they strolled past a row of sailboats rocking gently in their moorings, Lauren glanced at Blake with something like wonder in her eyes. "Do you ever think about how strange this is?" she asked. "What do you mean?" "That we met because of a cry. A single moment that could have been just an inconvenience to everyone else." Blake smiled softly. "Most miracles start as inconveniences," Lauren chuckled. "I'll have to remember that." They stopped near a cluster of docked boats, the water shimmering like broken glass beneath the sunlight. Lily snuggled deeper into Lauren's arms, her little cheek pressed to the treasured spot, just above the Admiral's ribbons. Blake's voice dropped low. "She loves you." Lauren's breath stilled. "I love her too." The admission came quietly, but with a truth so profound, it stole Blake's breath. As the weeks passed, whispers started within the naval base. Officers noticed how the Admiral's step softened on Monday mornings, how she hummed faintly during paperwork, how she now carried a quiet glow in her expression that no metal had ever put there. One afternoon, as she prepared to leave early to meet Blake and Lily, a junior officer smiled knowingly. "Busy evening," Ma'am Lauren lifted a brow. "Why do you ask you?" "Just look happy, Admiral." It took her a moment to respond. Finally, she said, "Yes." "I suppose I am." She wasn't ashamed of it. But the moment that truly changed everything happened on a late afternoon, drenched in sunset gold. Blake, Lauren, and Lily sat in a patch of grass near the waterfront, the kind of slow, quiet hour where time feels merciful. Lily sat between them, babbling happily, as she scribbled with crayons on a thick sheet of paper Blake had brought along. She drew with the determined chaos of a toddler, unsure of the limits of the world. Blake leaned back on his hands, watching her. "She's very focused today." Lauren smiled. "Maybe she's making something important." "Probably a masterpiece," Blake joked. Lauren nudged his arm, laughter spilling into her voice. "Everything she does is a masterpiece." When Lily finally finished, she held up the drawing with a triumphant squeal, then toddled toward Lauren and pressed it into her hands. Lauren looked at the page, and the world seemed to stop. 4 shapes. 4 tiny, colorful, wobbly figures. A tall figure with dark scribbles. For hair, Blake. A smaller figure in pink, Lily. A figure in white with gold dots, Lauren. And a 4th figure holding all their hands in one long chain of connection. Lily pointed at each one, naming in her baby language. Then she pointed at Lauren with unmistakable clarity. "Ma." Lauren's breath caught. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Tears pooled instantly in her eyes, not the fragile kind from the plane, but deep tears born of hope, restored wounds, stitched hearts rediscovered. Blake moved closer. "Lauren." She shook her head, voice trembling. "I didn't think I'd ever belong like this again." Blake placed his hand over hers. "You do." Her eyes lifted to his, raw, vulnerable shining. "Do you believe that she whispered?" "I do now," he said, voice rough with honesty. "Because Lily believed it first." Lily crawled into Lauren's lap, then babbling and giggling, her tiny hands tugging at Lauren's collar, as if reminding her she was chosen. Lauren held her close, her tears falling softly into Lily's hair. "Thank you," she whispered into the baby's ear. "Thank you for finding me." Blake watched them, his heart swelling with something that felt like awe. "We're not rushing anything," he said quietly. "But I think we're becoming something. Something real." Lauren nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "A family," Blake exhaled the truth, settling into his bones like a long-awaited sunrise. "Yes," he said. "A family." Lily squealed with pure delight, clapping her tiny hands, as if she understood perfectly. They sat together until the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the water in streaks of amber and rose. Blake reached out, and Lauren took his hand. Not tightly, not desperately, just naturally. And for the first time since their lives had been broken by loss, they allowed hope to feel like home. Before you go, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from tonight? Our community is filled with kind souls from all over the world, and your stories and thoughts always bring a special warmth to this channel. If this story touched your heart, or reminded you of the quiet strength we all carry, please consider subscribing to our channel. It helps us continue sharing uplifting moments of kindness, love, and second chances with wonderful viewers like you. Thank you truly for spending your time with us today. Your presence here means more than you know, and we hope to see you again in the next story.